We printed only 4 copies of the report. So, and I think what Reemsha tells me is we are going to plant 10 trees for every copy printed just to offset the impact of this. What we have done, however, is on each table there is a small tent card apart from the agenda section. It's called Climbs. And that is a way to offset the carbon footprint of this conference. We have actually calculated that between all your travel and all the work we are doing, we'll probably be creating almost 50,000 kgs of carbon impact. And if you can scan that, and we have tied up with this agency who will offset any 3 projects that you choose, which we have listed there. And hopefully we'll be able to, then reduce the impact of this conference. Coming back to a very pleasant topic and absolute privilege to have Harsh and Nisa on the dais with me. Basically, what I wanted to talk about and something that not only are investors who represent many companies and businesses of their own, we also have almost 40 of our founders in the room. So we really wanted to talk about building sustainable and responsible brands and businesses, which obviously as stalwarts of the industry, both of you have seen, not only for years or decades, but now centuries as far as the Godrej Group is concerned. So maybe I can start, Nisa, with you. To have a legacy of over 100 years and still be so respected, so relevant, so almost representing almost the best of what India has to offer. What is the secret sauce and what has kept it going?
I think sometimes our brand, just to be honest, might be ahead of where we are. I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me today. Mr. Mariwala, I don't know if I've ever told you this because I've not had much of a chance to speak with you, but Marico has always been a company and a brand that I've looked up to. I think when I joined our business, they had a big Uncommon Sense campaign. So I think the work they did on people, the innovations, the brand, I was just telling Rishabh what a great brand Kaya was. So, and I think the work Thyessa is also doing is just fantastic. I mean, this portfolio of brands is so exciting. So thank you for having me here. I think the secret sauce is that you have to make, I think, those decisions based on your purpose day in and day out, correct? And not let the siren calls sort of call you. And what I mean by that is that, Godrej started in India's freedom movement. I think Vinay was talking about these Indian products, correct, that are sort of either localized at a cost that is good for Indian, but our first product was a lock. And the lock actually, so at that time all these products were coming from England. And why we really won, and we had a patent for it, was that the lock was made leverless. So it wasn't rusting in the Indian weather, correct? So I think our foundation is innovation. We were the first in the world to commercially make soap from vegetable oil. So you can imagine in a country with Hindus and Muslims not using animal fat went a very long way. So I think the reason we've lasted so long is that we keep innovating. And then I think this doing business, with a focus on planet, with a focus on people, with a focus on trust, sometimes in the day-to-day, you might say, this would be a quicker, let's break the rules, and this is a quicker way to get something done. But I think over the longer term, the integrity, the trust people have in your brand, do what you say what you do, really pays back.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest learning for us is that a lot of our founders are now starting to think about long-term sustainable brand building. And that's really heartening because, the narrative is, what can I do in 5 years and then exit. But the mindsets are changing. And as you said, when you build with purpose, it truly helps in, achieving that. Coming to you, Harsh, I was reading earlier that this probably is the 50th year of the launch of Parachute. Is that correct?
Yeah, almost you can say that, yeah.
So I think 74 is when you had first,
Yeah.
launched the branded Parachute
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
market. So again, coming to you, like Nisa said, you have some of the most loved brands and sustaining them over 50 years and building the relevance of them for so
Yeah.
long. And you have obviously been, the biggest exponents of brands.
Yeah.
How do you, sustain that consumer love and the ability to get, build it, especially for the founders in the room who,
Yeah.
look up to you for some, real guidance on this?
So thank you, Kamal, and I think I'll speak about this Parachute brand in terms of how it has evolved over a period of time. So when I joined the organization at that time, we had Parachute brand in the big tins, which was sold loose to the consumer, and the quality of the oil was good. And when I went into the market, the retailer was charging a higher premium for Parachute loose oil. And that's what made me concentrate on the small packs. At that time, all my family, friends told me, don't do it under the brand name Parachute. But I don't know what happened to me, and I said, no, I have to continue under the same brand, and it's worked out well. But when we started, the market was very small. It was mainly in big tins, 2 liter, 1 liter, 500 ml, because it was a family brand. And as we progressed, we started launching smaller and smaller packs. So now we have packs starting from a sachet to 20 ml, 50 ml, 100 ml, 200 ml, 500 ml, 1 liter. So, and 2 liters. And most of the sales comes from smaller packs. We sell a lot of coconut oil. We sell something like about 7 crore packs every month. So it's a product which is used by all the income groups, all the ages in India. But over a period of time, I think we are seeing more and more segmentation. So initially we said we will only be coconut oil. Parachute was perceived to be coconut oil. And over a period of time, we said that we had to change our positioning. We connected to coconut and not necessarily oil. So then we went into extensions of Parachute in terms of anti-airfall, Parachute aloe vera, and many, many other extensions. And then we realized that beyond oils, we need to go into skincare. So we went into Parachute body lotion. And we just launched Parachute baby range as well as shampoos in one of the southern markets. And we also launched this in Bangladesh markets a few years back, which both the products are doing well. So what I'm trying to say is evolve. The journey started from coconut to anything connected to the coconut. But the core has remained same, in terms of the trust, the emotional attachment. And I think that's what has continued the brand. And over a period of time, we also have added the purpose to our brand. So we source a lot of copra, and we work with Kerala and Tamil Nadu farmers in terms of improving their yields. And as of today, we are working with almost 100,000 farmers. And we realized that by better cropping practices, we should be able to increase the yields. So we have a team of people who go to the farmers, give them advice, and they've been able to improve yields by almost 15%, aggregating to a total extra income of about 100 crores every year to the farmers. So that's the purpose behind the brand. And I think if I had to sum up what makes a good brand, I think one is the promise, what does the brand stand for, and that consistency of promise has to continue over a period of time. But it could shift a little bit. You can extend the brand, stretch the brand within a certain boundary. In this case, we stretch the brand from coconut oil to coconut oil derivatives to anything connected to coconut oil or coconut, not necessarily oil, for skin care, for baby care and shampoos. So I think that's what has made the brand strong, and the fact that we concentrated on very small packs. Even in a segment which is easy to copy in terms of the brand itself or the product itself, we've been able to retain a market share of 50% plus, because when the consumer has a very strong attachment to the brand, and when they buy a product for say 10 rupees or 20 rupees, because it's being bought in a very small quantity or 20 ml or 50 ml. Even if somebody tries to undercut us, it is a 20% discount is just 2 rupees, and for that 2 rupees, the consumer doesn't want to shift. So I think that's why the brand has consistently retained a market share of 50% for many, many years.
That's amazing. Very few categories have, brands having more than 50% share. So, congratulations.
Can I add something to Parachute? I know this was not my question, so sorry for trying to steal some thunder here. About 2 years ago, I spent a day walking around how garbage is collected and recycled and plastics collected in Bombay. And since that day, we've actually used Parachute as our benchmark on plastics, because if you talk to these people who are doing the recycling, this blue bottle is considered the best because there's not too, it can be easily cleaned, they can easily recycle it. The blue is always the same color and the quality of the plastic is the same. So I'm just, we're not in the oil, we're not in coconut oil, but so we use that now as a benchmark on can you actually standardize your plastic. So, we talk about PCR and all these things, but this is the most recycled FMCG product. And you could see these big blue, so sorry if that was your story.
No, thank you for saying that, but I think there's a separate question subsequently.
It's our benchmark.
Yeah, you're asking me about recycling, and I think that I'll cover that separately. We have a big project coming up on that front, but just one or two other things which occurred to me. The brand stands, blue is very important to the Parachute. So I think the Parachute logo has to be blue, and most of the products extensions also are blue. And number two, now I forgot to mention, we're taking this more as a global brand. Today, Parachute outside India sells about 1,300 to 1,500 crores, but we see it going to 3,000 to 5,000 crores over a period of few years. Because coconut is a superfood now. It's liked in all the countries. So our current main presence is in Bangladesh, Middle East, neighboring countries, but we are extending it to Africa. From Africa, we're going to go to other developed markets. But we see a very good opportunity to leverage the goodness of coconut through the Parachute brand name, but not in the same form. It'll have to be a form which will be relevant for that particular country. So Parachute in Middle East, Parachute in Africa will be very different from Parachute in, say, India.
Thank you, Harsh. Very inspiring. Thanks, Nisa, for that insight. Again, we have a separate session later in the conversation around the environment and how we are working on it. But before that, maybe I can go a little deeper into one area that you mentioned about innovation and how that's the spirit of how Godrej operates, and that's been the mainstay for the last 100 years. Is there something which is at the core of how you drive innovation? Is it culture? Is it people? Is it driven top down? How do you create that sense of innovation leading to success? If you could share some thoughts on that.
So I think we're like deep believers in product, correct? And this, like Mr. Mariwala mentioned, this 50% share in Parachute oil. We have that kind of share in, say, household insecticides. So I think we give a lot of importance to R&D and to design. In actuality, they sit at the center of our company. And that's not to say we're not consumer friendly, but R&D, design spend a lot of time with consumers also, correct? So I think we have a slightly, holistic approach to innovation where you want to be able to create moats. I think that's one thing. So it's not really this marketing, go speak to the consumer and then come to brief R&D, which does happen in consumer goods at all. So our system is a little bit different. I think the other thing that we look at as we build brands is, where is penetration low, correct? Either it's because it's a commodity and it can be branded, or you mentioned in India one, this sleep company is such a wonderful idea because Indians don't understand sleep hygiene. And you're not only building a brand, but you're building an idea of sleeping better. So I think we look at ideas like that. Where can we do penetration and not just grab market share? And then you look at solving unsolved problems. I think that's very important. And our model is that, you know, I'll give you an example. We're building the air freshener category in India, which is of 5% penetration. We have a product called Air Pocket, which is technically quite difficult to get right, correct? Working with substrates and perfumes is not easy. But these are products that will be 1,000 crore products. So we'll go for depth. We'll go for, you know, R&D being a moat. And then your other moat is obviously, you know, we're spending 1,000 crores a year in India building these brands. So I think we look at the product actually being very differentiated and solving an unsolved need.
Maybe you want to talk about your agarbatti and mosquito repellent, the new product.
Okay, that's that actually that's a very sad story for me. I was hoping not to talk about it, but fine. I guess if I'm giving you, no, actually in household insecticides, Godrej has two brands. We have Goodnight and Hit, and we've been market leaders, you know, for many years. What happened in the market over the last decade or last 5 years really, and this is actually an amazing innovation. So instead of worrying about the MNCs coming, please worry about your local players, because anything that's given me sleepless nights is local, regional. I don't have to fully play by the rules. So I would worry more about them than the global players. And what happened was, we actually innovated a product for 1 rupee, which was a piece of paper which had the insecticide molecule in it. So you burn it. It was called Fastguard, and the mosquitoes drop dead. So it's a poor person's aerosol. It went to 100 crores in a year. And then some smart entrepreneur, and then 100 of them got this idea, let's put these molecules into agarbattis. The issue for us was, this is a highly regulated industry, and they were putting pesticides, all sorts of chemicals coming in from China. I mean, one big learning from that was that we didn't have a corporate affairs department. Now we have a large corporate affairs. You need to, I think, working with the government, working with stakeholders becomes very important. But we've got a new molecule. We've got a new molecule now that so this year has been a good year for us. And we have exclusive use to the molecule again because we have this 50% share. So hopefully we're back again, and we've launched India's only legal agarbatti. But there we've copied, we've not innovated. But I think the brand is so strong that it's unlikely that we won't get 50% of this market also.
No, thanks for that. Actually, if I can ask a similar question, Harsh, to you, and we talk about it often in our past conversations, you know, this whole new age brands, the digital first kind of, you know, almost like a deluge that has happened in the last 5-10 years. I think Marico has taken a very different approach on how you are dealing with some of these companies and how you respond to them. If you could share some of your learnings from that.
So I think the first thing is I think I've spent 50 years in FMCG industry, and until 5 years back, it was the most defensive industry. Nobody could attack you because you needed big money in terms of creating awareness, advertising through television, press, at least a minimum budget of 25 crores plus. On top of that, you needed distribution catering to maybe hundreds of thousands of outlets. For that, you needed good distributors, critical mass. So there are enough things to prevent new entrepreneurs to get into FMCG. And the field was confined to 4 or 5 Indian big companies and some other companies, smaller companies also, but by and large, very defensive until D2C brands came in, which has been a big disruptor. So there are 2 ways of looking at these disruptions. One is that, okay, it will disrupt my current business. I have to protect my current business and perceive these disruptions as threats. Another is to wear a lens of opportunity, saying that, of course I have to protect my current brands, but in addition to that, can I leverage the opportunity in the marketplace? I think that's what Marico has done. I think we've been more acquisitive than other FMCG companies in D2C brands. We acquired 4 brands. We also have our 2 brands. So we have 6 brands. And it's shaped up well. I think Beardo, which was acquired about 4 years back, is doing about 150 crore turnover. Overall aggregate is doing about 500 crore turnover. But we see it doubling within the next few years. And we don't have the mindset of losing money. So clear direction is that we can't go on losing money, don't burn too much money. So Beardo is already making EBITDA positive, and over a period of time, we see all the brands being EBITDA positive. Of course, we have to sacrifice a little bit to get critical mass, but the way these brands are managed are very, very different from the current brand management. So we have decided that we will house them at a different location. We'll have a very young team managing this. We don't want them to get influenced by the FMCG mindset of plenty of resources in terms of advertising and things like that. So it's completely different. At some stage, when you reach a certain critical mass, we will use some of the hero SKUs which are getting traction to launch it through our sales and distribution channel, which already has started happening. But the whole range will not get lost. And then we also have best practices sharing session with the marketing of FMCG and marketing of D2C brands, because each can learn from each other. So we are quite positive about these investments, and I think we are excited about taking this forward.
In fact, Marico has always been extremely progressive in the acquisition strategy. Are the founders still running some of these brands, or?
So you're right, absolutely. Most cases, founders wanted to manage the brand and get an upside for a period of at least 2-3 years. So I think in all cases, all 4 acquisitions, we made 4 acquisitions. One was Beardo, second was Just Herbs, and these 2 have already come in our fold now. Third was True Elements, and fourth was Plix. So we have arranged. So we have to be flexible if you want to acquire these brands, which will be a certain stake when we acquire, but over a period of time, with guardrails and all, depending on the top line, bottom line, whatever expectation, they will get that upside in valuation, and they will continue managing it for a period of 2-3 years. We will add value to them, but fundamentally they will manage it on their own. And at some stage it will come, and now we are combining all the digital brands we've taken a senior person from Flipkart who's managing these digital brands, and we will get economies of scale because all 6 brands will get clubbed under one person. But you're right, we had to be flexible. Otherwise, if you're not flexible, we would not have been able to make any of these acquisitions, because the sellers didn't want to sell, but they wanted to participate. They wanted an upside, which has happened in all the cases. And I think ultimately, over a period of 3 years, the brands will come to us.
Yeah, actually, we are seeing a very similar trend. Yoga Bar we talked about with ITC, again, a similar formula. So the flexibility that a lot of the strategics are showing is very heartening. If I can change the topic a little bit around people and organization, Risa, you talked very vocally about DEI, diversity, inclusivity. How does, again, that manifest itself? I mean, how do you balance between, choosing the right candidate for the right job versus wanting to have a specific agenda around more diverse workforce?
So I think, the first part I'll answer really again, and I'm going to make myself sound like a very old company, but that we started in the Swadeshi movement. And I think, for everyone in this room, if you have the ability to work for an organization, start an organization, I think there's a social justice piece about leaving the world better than you found it. And organizations can really be, these islands of inclusion, these islands of equity. And I think in the long term, organizations that are able to do it win in the market, correct? So I think you can see the numbers. I think that being said, you know, I don't think any of us here do things just from our heart or from a social justice perspective. Otherwise, we'd be in the non-profit sector and not sitting here. So I think from the sort of, if you think about it from the head part, correct? It's common. I mean, we shouldn't even in today's day and age have to be talking about it. But for example, we recently acquired a brand called Kama Sutra. It's a sexual wellness condom brand. I mean, I'm sitting around that table thinking, who's really having sex here and what's going on? And honestly, it shouldn't be just the older men in the room deciding, correct? Like, let's have the young woman with the feminist point of view sort of do that. So I think if you look at something like that, it becomes very important. I'll give you Godrej's example, correct? Again, a head part. But we had one gay employee who joined us, Parmesh Shahani, and he used us as the LGBT. We're a very liberal sort of organization. But if you think about us from the outside, a lot of people would think, oh, are they a Parsi retirement home, correct? Like the outside, no, don't. I mean, I hope you all don't. But there is always, what is this old brand, all these new age brands, correct? And if you think about this LGBTQ platform, and it's the right thing to do, we really believe in it. So we're not doing it for marketing, but you know, we're having these, we have these events, we put out these messages, and it helps us attract talent, correct? Maybe there are people who choose not to be with us because of that, but then we don't want people like that either. So I think there's a lot of business benefit, and you know, like when people say, but you know, but this is all do good, or really it's too much effort, you know, just look at Microsoft. Look at what Satya Nadella has done over the last 10 years. Collaboration, more women, more inclusivity. He's used, I think, what is best about India's spiritual values, what is best about Gandhi, and taken that company to the most valuable. So I think there are two pathways. We always have these choices as pathway, but I do think if you're a leader, this is privilege for you to build an organization which stands for what is best about being human versus what is not, correct? So, and it makes business sense also.
Wow. That is truly inspiring, Nisa. And I mean, certainly for our founders, I think this is a message, I mean, we have been conveying, but I mean, we can't say it even
Yeah, and
close
just to add to that, I think for founders, what we found also, greenfield is where you can really go out and do it, correct? So we're setting up a new manufacturing unit in the south where we've said, you know, over 50% women, LGBTQ, PWD, because it's easy to do it in greenfield. Or it solves a business issue. Like I was just having a conversation with my head of HR from our agri-business, and she's saying, you know, if I have to build women in sales, women in manufacturing has been a challenge in India. She said, but what if you know, and it's about safety, it's about access to bathrooms. She said, but what if I go hyper-local and just get the housewives, the young girls from colleges there, and just spend a lot of money on the training to bring them up, correct? And we have, I mean, people who work with sales teams have high attrition and stuff, so you can bring attrition down. So you can use this also to solve your business issues.
So I must tell you, you know, I met a young founder in our portfolio, and he talked specifically about building a team which encourages more LGBTQ and, you know, very diverse kind of a team. So you know, very heartening to see how, you know, you are addressing that, and I'll introduce you to the founder if we have the time over lunch. Harsh, on the people issue, I wanted to delve a little bit into, you know, one of your favorite topics, and all of us look up to you on that, is building an organization that lasts. And also the way you have looked at succession in your business, and you know, it's almost a case study now how you have managed it. So if you could share some learnings on both how does one, because, like Kanan said in the morning, we are also trying to learn saying every, few hundred crores of revenue, the business organizational design almost needs to change. So how do you really navigate that? How do you hire the talent, and how do you even, plan for people who are already in the organization and not really ready to step up to the next level? And maybe you can talk a little bit about succession also.
Yeah, I can speak on the subject for half an hour, but we have limited time. But so I think the key thing is you have to have a very strong employee value proposition. That is the starting point. What is unique about you compared to your competitors? Or unique about you, which will attract talent from your targeted group of companies. You need to at least dig deep and identify what is unique about you. In our case, when Marico was formed in the year 1990, we found that our uniqueness came from the fact that we were empowering people at a much younger age. There was a very strong job rotation program. We had a very flat organization structure, and our target group of companies was more MNCs, where a lot of decisions were taken by somebody sitting in their headquarters outside India. As against that, here everything was happening. So I think we leveraged on that, and then you need to create that image of what is unique about you in the marketplace or in the job marketplace, amongst whoever you're recruiting from and overall general. I think that's the starting point. And then I think you need to create a culture which is empowering, where you get a lot of freedom. There is a high degree of openness and trust. I have not worked anywhere else, but I always go on hearing that this company there is a lot of backbiting, this company there is a lot of politicking, there is a lot of gossiping. And we wanted to avoid that from day one. So proactively ensuring that if you have anything against each other, please tell them on their face rather than bitching behind their backs. I will talk to 20 other people, but not tell you that you are like this, So we have open house sessions, we have relationship reviews with the team and the subordinates. We went into an open house. Every year, anybody can ask any questions to the management. Everybody calls each other by the first name. So that's how when you reinforce openness from different angles, then you create an open culture. And then we also send our leaders to a training program. It's a 6-day training program in terms of leadership style. What kind of leadership style we want them to practice. In Marico, if somebody comes with a highly autocratic leadership style, that person will not be able to settle down, because there will be rebellion from the bottom. So it's very clear that when you make a choice, you have to ensure that the person has the right leadership style, the right values fit, and then it gets reinforced again through this training program. So I think the key thing is have the right culture where people enjoy working, they get an opportunity to grow. There is very little of, as I said, backbiting, negative factors. And of course, remuneration, all that is important. You have the right kind of boss. But I think that's what retains people, In spite of that, we lose people. I must say that we are not that. But when you have a good image in the job market, that it's easier for me to attract people from Marico, and Godrej has also taken many Mariconians, I know that.
That's because that's because happens when you're so good.
So then you become a poaching ground, which is okay, because just like you lose talent, you are able to attract talent also. So to some extent that keeps us fresh. Our average age after so many years in business for the organization must not be more than 30 or 35. Because we have an active job rotation program, and I think we have some degree of attrition. And the other thing which we go a little bit overboard is to look at all our ex-employees, because we treat them as ambassadors. If somebody wants to join us and if they know somebody who has worked, they will check with that person, how was Marico, how was your experience? And if they get a positive view from ex-employee, then that helps us. And many ex-employees also have joined us back after leaving for a few years, because they were missing us or there was an opportunity which we could provide to them. So I think look at ex-employees also very, very seriously. We have called them to celebrations when we touched 5,000 crore turnover, call them for a dinner, and just to show, and they're all networked through digital means. So I think you need to look at ex-employees also from that angle.
Can I just add something to that? I think, you know, I heard that you said like two of the founders were sort of coaching and stuff. I do believe that if you build your own leadership capability and brand, that is a very, because the highest consciousness the leader can reach, I think that's what the company can reach. And you know, this very high ambition, we want to get to these valuations and stuff, that drives us to be successful, but it's also the path that can be our downfall, correct? Our strengths are our weakness. And I think the more work that you can do to hold the tough and the ambition with the love, and making sure that you leave, you know, when you're younger, and I've been through this journey, you want to leave the organization better and successful. But if you build that capability of leaving the individual feeling successful and held up, and even if you have to ask someone to leave, I think Mr. Mariwal mentioned give feedback, be honest, don't backbite. I think that's where great organizations for the long term are built, correct? Because leaders learn from leaders.
I totally agree. In fact, one of the challenges a lot of our companies are facing, and I would love to get both your perspective on that, is as the organization is growing, very often the people who have been with you from day one, you know, there's loyalty, they were with you, they supported you, they then don't fit the role, and you have to build almost like a new organization around them. You know, sometimes hire persons who are, you know, senior to them, and maybe, you know, if they have to report into the next level of senior leaders. How do you manage that in a human way and in a transparent way? And I know, Harsh, you have talked about it in the past, but I think that's a real challenge a lot of our companies are facing as they scale.
No. I think this honesty and authenticity is important, correct? I've asked people to leave who I've worked with for a very long time. I've cried in those conversations, correct? But eventually you have to be honest, because as soon as you start managing around someone, or you hire people around them because they can't do their role, you're selling the company short, but you're also selling the individual short, correct? So you can support that person as a human being, correct? You can help them find another role, you can give them feedback, but you have to be, you're not being fair to them or to the organization if you're not willing to have those honest conversations.
So I've done that many times, many times. Many a times, some member who has been extremely valuable to you at some stage starts losing relevance because that person is not able to cope up with the complexity of growth and larger scale. And if that person continues, what will happen is the performers will get demotivated because you are supporting a non-performer or a weak performer, especially at senior and middle senior levels, you know. And I'm absolutely clear, and this is something which many entrepreneurs are reluctant to act on, but I always have a thumb rule. What is good for the organization comes first. Whether it is organization versus key employee, or organization versus promoter, or organization versus anybody else, you know. When you have the dilemma, the organization's interests have to come first. So you have to have the courage of your conviction, and I fully agree with her that it is a difficult conversation. You have to, and it's very, I mean, it's not a pleasant conversation. But one thing I keep in mind is that you have to be humane in handling that. So don't give that person a chance, give some inputs. If at the end of it, that person should have actually known if that he's not performing and should have left on it. But if that person is still continuing, then you have to sit down and say that this is not working out. We are ready to pay you whatever 3 months, 6 months salary. If you don't get a job, then we will ensure that financially you're not hurt. And one other thing, at least I have at the back of my mind, is that whenever there is an occasion in that person's family, I should end the conversation in such a way that I get invited to that occasion after, if there's a wedding in the family. So, you have to be very, very human in this. And you have to be very, very conscious of that person. But let me tell you, in most cases, that person has been able to find something else, which is a better fit for that person. And that person is happier going into the newer environment. So don't feel guilty about it. And you have to always say that the organization interests come first.
Thanks. I'm going to make an announcement here, which may be a deluge for Harsh, but just before we started, Harsh mentioned that he's open to mentoring a few startup founders. So please connect with us and we will connect you with Harsh. And I told him you're going to get 40 people signing up. So he says, I will manage that, but I would love to spend more time with founders. So thank you.
Just
Thank
to
you.
add, I think,
Are you taking
Kamal,
non-founders also, Harsh?
I do a lot of mentoring. I do at least 8-10 mentoring sessions a month.
Ignoring
But it's a
me now.
mentoring, it's not coaching. So don't, and there's a big difference between mentoring and coaching. Mentoring is, give me your issue and I will try and suggest this is the way out, rather than sitting and, coaching you over a period of time. Just 1 or 2 mentoring sessions I've seen are enough in most cases, because broadly I've been able to identify what are the areas. And many a times, I've also involved the Marico team members. If there is some digital need for some entrepreneur, or a marketing need, or a supply chain need, or HR need, I will invite that person from Marico to help that entrepreneur. Because I strongly believe that entrepreneurs will create the future of India. Nobody else. The government will not create. And only entrepreneurs will drive us to a $5 trillion or $10 trillion economy. And I think to that extent, most welcome. If I get too many requests, then I will pace it out over a period of time, but I'll definitely meet each other. It has to be consumer facing. I am not a technical or technology person.
Fortunately, all our founders are consumer facing, so that is not a problem. I'm conscious of time and I want to leave a little bit of time for any questions from the audience. So I will end with one important topic which really is close to all our hearts, is really about the environment and the planet. Nisa, I was reading on your website, you talk about we are a good and green company. And I know there's a lot of initiatives that Godrej is doing in that space. If you could, share some of the, interesting ideas, what is really driving that aspect of do good to the world for leaving a better world. I think a lot of our companies can get very inspired by that. And then maybe Harsh, we can talk about the plastic initiative that you have started.
I'll start off by saying I was at at this relatively big conference where, not big conference, about 30 people, where I was asked to present, and this was Al Gore's investment fund, which has quite an ESG climate focus. He's been a big advocate. And he asked me the question, are you just serving consumer needs or are you creating the consumer needs? Correct? And I said, I feel that we do create consumer needs because we use, we create the product, then we advertise it, and we say you need it. And he said people are 50-50 split on this question. So I think the first thing I think Godrej would start with is what is in our portfolio and what are we willing to invest in. So you said, like we don't do alcohol or we don't do, and it doesn't have to be for ESG but like we would not do unhealthy food, correct? I think you're selling sugar and plastic, spending millions of dollars and then saying I'm going to take a little sugar and little plastic out I think so that is the starting basis of what we want to do. I think Kanan mentioned when we were talking is about this, why does it have to be the green premium versus the green discount, correct? And we are mass market where I don't even know if we come into your India 3, probably. I'll check with my team. But that is our business. And what you want to do is high quality products, but at the most accessible price. So the less plastic you give them, the less of what you don't need, makes it more powerful. I'll give you two examples. So we have a product called Magic. It's a range of products. We have a hand wash, body wash, and floor cleaner, which is it's a powder. You put it into water and you reconstitute it. So you're not selling bottles, you're selling less plastic, you're not transporting water. So the hand wash impact on the environment is less than the bar soap. So I can give someone a better quality product, but at a sort of lower impact. So I think that's the emerging market in opportunity. Don't just copy and paste from the West, correct? It's a bit like the landline and mobile phone. That is the opportunity that we have in product. Another example, I'll give you, one of my biggest businesses is this mosquito repellent. So in the Goodnight, you buy a machine, you plug it in, and then I put, it's a bottle that you fit into the machine. We had relaunched our product maybe 4 years ago, and we needed a very specialized wick, which was plastic coming from the US. And the team worked on it. I think there's some of this, invention is the mother of necessity. So COVID ruins your supply chains, makes it much more expensive. We did the same wick organically, correct? We figured out how to do it, and this is that deep product knowledge, and we saved 60 crores on our business, correct? So it's not a either or. I think Mariko also has a business in South Africa, and if you go there, they have 12 hours of load shedding. So 12 hours electricity is not, and electricity has just become more and more expensive. We have a hair color business there. Now they're innovating to make that hair color business a cold process versus a hot process. So you can, I'm just giving you a few examples. So I think what's very important is to take your philosophy into hard-coded, what am I going to be, what am I going to do, plastic neutral. I mean, what is your DJSI ranking you want? That has to all be hard-coded. If you leave it fuzzy, we'll say, chalo, it'll happen later. I think that has to be hard-coded, and then it has to go into people's goal sheets, correct? So we have a call out for people and planet, and you then have to really hard code it, and then you have to, I think some of these things you also have to be unapologetic about and just drive it, correct? Because I'll hear, why have you kept this role just for a woman, correct? Are you merit? Is this merit based? I'm like, I'm not going to hire someone who can't do the role, but women have not got the same equity as men, so hey, we're going to call this out. So I think some of this are sustainable. There's a cost to it, correct? Sometimes there's a cost in consumer quality trade-off. I'm talking plastic they're not washing themselves with plastic, so the less the better. But we have a big soap business, and the more oil palm you have, the better the quality of the soap. But oil palm is related to deforestation. In hair color, we've done a 15 rupee sachet creme. You're putting more. So I'm not saying that we're angels. There are things to be worked out, but you have to keep taking the targets to address them.
Absolutely. I think that has been the big question that we have been, working with our portfolio, saying, is it good to do, or is it a business benefit? And in the long run, how does it help the brand? So I think some of these are very seminal.
But you think of work
questions.
from home. If anyone had told any of us, tell your company to work from home, we would have been like, don't joke, correct? And now after people are saying you can't work from home. But it's once you're put to the fire, you have to do it. So just put yourself on the fire, correct? It can be done. That is, anything that's changed the world is by individual leadership. So.
Well, thank you. And Harsh, if you could talk, you've done a lot of work around the whole plastic circularity.
Yeah, so, whenever I spoke at various events and I spoke about how we converted the whole market of coconut oil from tin to plastic, and that was the biggest trigger for us to increase our market share. And we did multiple things in conversion. In spite of all the opposition, we were able to do that in India, we were able to do that in the whole Bangladesh market, and that really catapulted us into becoming a strong. But at the end of that lecture, I would say, but what are you doing about the negative impact plastics is creating on the environment? And that was really haunting me, and I didn't have an answer. So as of today, about 94% of our plastics which we are using can be recycled, but that doesn't mean that they're getting recycled. Can be recycled. So there is a big theoretical say, okay, it's recyclable, but to make this plastic recyclable, you need three things. One is collection of waste from households in the right manner. And there are a lot of lobbies in terms of waste collectors, kabadiwalas, who collect the waste. And then currently most of it is done manually. So we have been able to identify a service provider. We did a study on plastic innovations 2 years back. And that identified 16 organizations which were actually doing work in the area of replacing, reusing and recycling plastics. So one or two organizations out of that were making very high speed machines, recycling machines, 6 tons per hour AI assisted. The whole segregation will happen brand wise also. And then we were able to identify some service provider who had some experience in recycling, and currently we are at a stage where we will prototype this in 2 cities. And the biggest challenge in this circular economy is collection of waste. So we will try and use our approach to collect the waste in the right way, segregate it and sell it to the end user. And most FMCG companies are looking at recycled plastic as a substitute to plastic up to a certain percentage. So on paper it looks very good, and if this experiment is successful, then and financially also it looks relatively attractive, not that attractive. But if we are able to crack this in 2 cities, one we are doing in Hyderabad, another is in Raipur, we will launch it, this whole project will get launched in the next 2-3 months. I think if we are able to succeed, I'm very, very excited about this project if you ask me. Then we will be able to ask the likes of Godrej to also start doing this in wherever they have, because the interest level is huge in this. And then, if you're able to tackle this waste, but still there is a big if, we need to crack this model. But that's where our attention is going towards in terms of creating the circular economy.
Yeah, we're also doing something like this, similar to this in Pondicherry. And actually, these are areas, and it's so good you have someone like Reemsha for your portfolio, where a lot of collaboration can happen. I was speaking to someone in L'Oreal. I mentioned this hair color sachet problem. It's a technical problem of how you have to package hair color, correct? But say if we could join forces, then you're talking of over 55% of the market. And could you jointly talk to suppliers together? Because sometimes you also need, say, for PCR and all, the market also has to develop the ecosystem, the circular economy also. So a lot of collaboration is needed.
No, absolutely. In fact, we have been talking to pretty much, apart from you guys, the Unilever, the ITC, Nestle, L'Oreal, everybody is very keen. We are trying to figure out what is the right way to create this collaboration. And it has to be addressed. I don't think there is a choice for that. I think we are running almost out of time. I do want to leave a little bit of time for any questions from the audience. It's been particularly heartening for me to share the dais with Lisa and with Harsh. I think there's a question at the back.
Yeah. Hi, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to both of you all. Enough is known about Marico and Godrej, so no questions on the companies and strategies. But in general, sir, I want to know from both of you all that at this point in time, how do you all, gather insights, spend your day, what kind of reading you all do, and, if we can pick up some things out of those.
We come here to see what's happening in the world. I think, you know, I do read a lot. I think the best way is both to go outside in, something like this, meet people. You know, I was joking with Rishabh and Saket, are we all going to line up to meet the same founders, or will there be different ones to learn from, to see opportunities? The other is that after this conference, I will go for a market visit with my team. I was at a factory last week. So I think you have to stay in touch with the front line. My best time at Godrej actually is when I'm with consumers, because then you get a real reality check, correct? We're sitting in our our AC cars, being the 1%, and then you really go and see what people need. So, and you know, India is not India, it's so diverse and so much changing. So I think both outside in, but also going to speaking to your front line.
So I think for me, one is there are a lot of trends which happen in the Western countries. And what are these trends? It's a matter of time these trends come to India. So maybe 5 years back, we also invested in a company which is similar to Fireside in USA, and they invest, and then me and my son went there, and we spent 2 days just understanding what are the new trends, you know. So trends at that time, very strong trends about vegan, organic, natural, health, immunity, and we've seen that they got accelerated, especially during COVID times. So one is the outside in terms of what is happening in other countries. Are there opportunities for you to leverage that by visiting those countries, by studying them? But it's very important that you will pick up some fantastic ideas which you can leverage either in terms of a product or a range of products or a brand. Another is constantly, as she was saying, on the lookout. When you meet people, you have to go on asking questions. What is the new thing? Whether it's the consumer, whether it's the trade. And I also do that same thing by visiting the trade, distributors, consumers. And of course, reading is another thing, participating in such events. So always on the lookout for learning. And many times you may not be able to apply it immediately, but at some stage you can leverage it for future.
Thank you so much. I think we have messages flashing saying time is up, so I will wind up here. Thank you so much, Nisa and Harsh. This has been a pleasure and an honor. Really appreciate it.